Hello, dear students. In the last four lectures, I have introduced the works of Adrian Rich and the way she has been critically received and appreciated and criticized. Now, in this series of lectures, we are going to focus on a specific poem by her, Snapshots of a Daughter-in-Law. This was published in a volume in 1963. As you can easily make out from the title, Snapshots of a Daughter-in-Law. Now, what is it that you can make out? That on one side, there are snapshots. Snapshots are that have been taken over a period of time. And these snapshots belong to a daughter-in-law. And normally, as we see in middle-class houses, there are pictures all around hanging on the walls depicting different kinds of times. So through the image of these snapshots, Adrian Rich speaks of a woman's experience as a daughter-in-law. It is a feminist poem depicting a woman of the period of transition, especially the 60s and the 70s, when women had become conscious of the many restrictions and burdens upon them imposed by the male dominated society, family, culture, and literature, but were not able to overcome the limitations. The result, both in reality and in the poem, is an unbearable anxiety. Now, see, what we need to understand here is that women were increasingly getting conscious of the kinds of restrictions and limitations that were imposed upon them, but still in the public domain, women's participation was not that much. So if somebody is under some kind of clutches and there is an entire there are generations that have lived in those restrictions and foundations, uh, they do fine in a way until they realize that they are trapped. So this feeling of being trapped, of being subjugated, once it emerges, it wants a release. And from that point of view, 60s and 70s was a difficult time because women were finding it very difficult to come out with their problems and to speak for their own selves. Rich wrote the present poem over a period of 2 years when she herself was married to a Harvard economist and was a young mother with three children, like the daughter-in-law in the poem. So she herself was living within patriarchal structures that constrained a woman's intellect. The speaker in the poem sees herself as a daughter-in-law without a personal identity of dignity or as a person who exists in relation to other people and structures. That is why she is aggressive due to her frustrations and anxiety. This is a very basic way of looking at the poem. When we will discuss the poem in detail, we will know because this is an introduction that I've taken from a writer, which I've quoted at the end. Uh, this writer emphasizes upon the terms like aggression, frustration, anxiety. Although those things are there, but things are much more deep. And what we need to understand at this point is that Adrian Rich herself, in this poem, speaks from her own experience. Well, it's not easy to be a young mother with three children and say if you are living with your in-laws or if then you have to play the role of a daughter-in-law, and there is this whole burden of a whole lot of expectations from a daughter-in-law, whether it is east or west. Certain expectations might uh, change their nature or expression, but of course there is the burden of a lot of expectations, right from the husband to the children to say the neighbors to the in-laws. So these and especially these limitations, especially these kinds of expectations for a woman who is a writer, or for somebody who is an intellectual, are not easy to really fulfill or to comply with. Again, if we look at it in a simple manner, it is a dramatic monologue. There is a single speaker. This title poem, written during 1958 to 60, explores the depression of many middle class women in the 50s for whom success was defined by the feminine mystique, the sweetly laughing, sweetly singing woman who must attract and hold a man who cares for her, that is, takes care of her. Right? See, the emphasis takes care of her. Rich laments the waste of energy in society that values women not for experience but for beauty. The dependent women were caught up in anxiety just as the independent women were hounded by guilt and fear of being unfeminine. As in the case of the present daughter in law, anger was denied, converted into despair, and even madness, or up to the thoughts of committing suicide. The sense of frustration, guilt, and suppressed anger is a major theme of this poem. This poem also expresses the conflict between her burden of everlasting responsibilities and her creative side, as well as the need to free herself from poetic conventions of the past and to express her new themes by transcending not only male norms and expectations, but also traditional female boundaries. See, students, this general introduction to the poem has been given by Kedar Sharma, and here what we see is a very basic kind of introduction to to this poem, but I wanted this basic introduction at this stage so that we frame a general kind of an idea that what overall this poem is all about. But when we will analyze it further, we know that her poetry Rich's poetry has several layers, and they are very rich in imagery and symbolism, and she uses myths also. So, in the forthcoming lectures, we are going to take up the poem and analyze it more closely. Thank you.